chamomile tea for here.
Hey everybody, it's Zach and Jessica Romoff here. She's a poet from Santa Monica, and I'm doing my first video interview with her. And so this is the first interview for Dreams Over Drinks. So the first question is, what is your dream?
My dream is to find love and for equality for women.
Yeah. And what does equality for women look like?
I think the wage gap being mended and young girls being taught to live the same way young boys do, and for, like, I guess the rape statistics to fall, and for me to stop having to write my poetry, I think, you know, to stop having to, like, explain why the world looks the way it does to different people.
Yeah. And so is that really why you started writing poetry?
Yeah.
Talk about those feminist issues?
Yeah, I was just I started writing when I was in 8th grade, and I just was getting really annoyed with, like, the way my mom would talk to me, and the way I'd see it was different with other boys my age and their relationships and what their parents would tell them. And I was just getting really fed up with it, and I was like, I have to say something, so I decided to start writing.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
And so why is poetry that avenue for you? Like, why not like any other sort of writing, any other creative?
Because I think specifically slam poetry is a way to connect a group of people vocally with having, like, a face behind an issue. I think is really important, because normally you hear about all these different problems going on in the world, but they just sound like thrown around statistics. But when you see a face behind it talking about this certain issue in an artistic way is really important, and I think impactful for people. Performing at the Women's March, I got a lot of positive feedback, which is really nice because it's supportive, because I think living in the community that I do, which is Brentwood, I get a lot of negative feedback with my poetry, like it's too honest, and no one really wants to hear what I'm talking about. Yeah, a lot of people don't like my poetry, or, like, especially I like to read my poetry at school, and a lot of kids don't like it, and they think that it's unimportant what I'm talking about. So when I get to perform in front of people who want to learn and listen, it's really inspiring for me as well, because I want to keep writing and doing what I do.
Wow, I cannot believe that's, like, so surprising. Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just, like, in a bubble to realize that so many people have an issue with that. Maybe that's why it's so important to have your poetry. That's why you keep saying it. So that's rad. And then I want to ask you, though, because when you start your poetry, like, you were talking, like, you gave a little intro at the rally, but then you, like, turned the switch and you, like, went in on it.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
I think it's, like, because I have, like, my poetry voice and I have, like, my talking voice, and I think when I have something important to say and I know I have to say something important, like, I get in it, and, like, yeah, my voice totally changes, and I, like, turn into, like, a different person. Like, people say, like, you sound so different when you read poetry than when you're actually talking.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like, especially when, like, if you get in an argument with someone, or you have something that you need people to listen to, I think there's more conviction, and it's also, spoken word poetry is a performance art, so there's a lot of acting in it as well.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of what happens.
That was rad. I was like, oh, all right. That's really cool. It's interesting because when you have a conversation about what feminism is, some people get offended. Like, some people like don't even know what it means. But from my understanding, the whole basis of it is literally just equality. Like, that's it. And people are just afraid of it. So what is that issue?
What's really scary for people when they hear feminism is being feminine is really threatening, I think, for people. So to hear the word feminism, they think of, like, feminine, which has connotations of being weak and fragile, and, like, a woman, which has, again, so many negative connotations in our society. Like, when boys play sports, they'll be like, oh, you're running like a girl, like, run like a boy. And, which is unfair, and I think that that's what really scares people, is they don't want to be associated with this feminine aspect. But I think being feminine is really powerful, and the whole idea of feminism is, like, equality for everyone. And I think that people are really threatened by that idea. And there's a lot of different, levels of feminism. So I think that people get caught up in that as well.
Yeah, it's crazy because from a guy's perspective, you couldn't really assume to understand what a woman goes through during the day. And my friends and I went for like a wine, like hangout night with my teacher. She just took us out, and the conversation like turned into like talking about what feminism is, and like I had an understanding already, but then I couldn't assume I didn't understand what privilege meant, like coming from a guy's perspective, and like they like put me in check, which is super cool actually.
And important,
yeah. Yeah, and so it's interesting how your poetry is like that message in a way, and it's also just like shedding light on a perspective that as males here, like we can't assume. So it's really cool.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. And I think it's important, like, for people to want to learn, especially in this period of history and time. People need to be able to be open, even if it's not their opinion. Like, I consider myself radically liberal, and I think it's important for me to listen and learn from people that don't have the same ideas as me, because that's how we grow, and it can make people uncomfortable. But I think that's so important, so that you're able to get like checked your privilege. I think is like so awesome.
Yeah,
like
it's
you
cool.
put yourself, because it's uncomfortable, especially to talk about these topics, because we don't know like what the right word is, or like how to like say things correctly, and it's just about like I guess putting yourself in that uncomfortable position.
Yeah, exactly. And then you mentioned like the other part of your finding love. I always like asking people, what does love look like to you? Because I feel like it can just come in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think love, I think when people think of love, they think of like, oh, being with another person, but I think a lot of what I'm going for is like self-love and learning to love myself first before I love someone else. And I think, my definition right now of what love looks like is accepting who I am and really like wholehearted loving myself.
That's awesome. How do you train yourself to do that really? Because I feel, again, like it's not something we're raised to do.
Yeah, I think it's so like opposite spectrums. It's like boys are not like taught to be like in touch with their emotions or like love themselves, and girls are taught like to be in touch with their emotions but like to hate themselves. And it's like this constant like of like women shaming in society that's like a big part of what I've experienced, and like slut shaming and putting girls down who are confident in themselves. And I think it's about like trying to unwrap like all that like your parents and your teachers and the magazines have like told you like what to be, and like learning to like understand who you are and like love that unconditionally, because that's the only way you can like extend yourself to someone else, I think, if you really love yourself. What is taught when like people, what they see, what they think of love is like what they see in movies, and it's like someone is so incomplete without like their other half, which I think is like unfair to yourself. I think that you need someone else to complete you. Like when I grew up watching like princess movies, and I talked about this in my poem, where like in every single princess movie I ever watched, the princess and the girl always had to be rescued by the boy, and then she was happy, and then she could be herself. Which I think puts the idea, and definitely put the idea in my head, is that like I'm incomplete without a boy, and I'm incomplete without somebody in my life. Which is like terrifying to like put in people's heads, and that's not what love should look like. I think it should look like you said, like being one whole with another whole.
Yeah. Do you think that's kind of where like media and stuff like that is where we're raised to learn that?
Yeah, I think a lot of like what we learn, like I think for boys, they're always seeing like superheroes and violence, and they're like that's what masculinity and that's what power looks like. And then girls always see that they're being rescued by someone else, so they're like, that's what my life is going to look like. I'm just going to be rescued by some boy, and then that's how I'm going to survive. And I think that's like where codependency comes in, where like girls become very dependent in relationships, and it's terrifying for them. But yeah, the media like definitely puts a lot of ideas in our head that I think is very dangerous sometimes. From the moment we are unwrapped from our mother's arms, the way the first rose blooms in a field of winter, we are taught the hereditary habit of shrinking. From as early as I can remember, I had bookshelves spilling with stories of princesses locked up in towers, plagued with a tail instead of legs, accidentally eating poisonous apples, all waiting for a man's mouth to make them human again, to kiss the death out of their poison, to save this poor girl. Stitched from tissue and silence, from a young age, I was taught that to be a woman was to be rescued by someone else, that my body was not my own unless a man made it one. It is a teaching I do not remember learning, to burn down this childhood house. But when you are around someone long enough, you begin to pick up their habits, the way my friend would pinch at her stomach, a woman in the hotel bathroom criticizing the mirror, watching my mother earn 75 cents to a man's dollar. High school girls are terrified of wearing a skirt to school because their teachers will remind them of how their bodies are an unwanted distraction, because they are hindering their male classmates' education. And here is the lineage of shrinking women, sacrificing an 8th grade girl's bony knees for the sake of excusing another teenage boy. It is a habit of making our girls hate themselves. And they remind us that it is better to be silent than to make them uncomfortable. But still, people always wonder why girls say sorry before asking a question. It is because we are taught that our voices take up too much space, that we are an apology. But what I should have been told is how there is nothing more powerful, more dangerous than a woman who loves herself. There is nothing more beautiful and violent than a woman working 4 shifts a day, or a mother who runs the household, who can say, I love myself. Instead of giving our daughters stories of how to be rescued, or how to be saved, or how to be forgotten, let's start reminding our daughters of all the battles we fought and won, because we are soldiers in silk, fighting this war on body and mirror, learning to plant blossoms in our bruises, to grow gardens in our gashes, watching history try and pluck the petals of our violent hearts. They say, a woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong it is until it's in hot water. We are not here to burn the skin of our sanctuary. We are here to rebuild the ruins of our temple, long ago destroyed. Instead of learning to say, I love you, we can learn to say, I love myself. The most ruthless battle cry there ever was.